keep on teaching. Preachers, keep on preaching. World, keep on turning, 'cause it won't be too long. Lovers, keep on loving. Believers, keep on believing. Sleepers, just stop sleeping, 'cause it won't be too long. So don't let me try it again. 'Cause the last time on earth I lived the whole world of sin. So glad now I know more than I knew then. Gonna keep on trying till I reach my highest ground. Till I reach my highest ground. No one's gonna bring me down. Till I reach my highest ground. Till I reach my highest ground. Till I reach my highest ground.
Welcome to Virtual WellSprings. I'm Sandy Tucker. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm honored to be your worship leader today. If you are new to us, we welcome you with open arms. If you are already a member, I look forward to the day when we can once again meet in person. Each week when we gather, we light a chalice as a symbol of our spiritual heritage. It is not just a symbol that is past, but of what is present, that inner light that is a part of each of us. As we light this chalice, may we share the light of each of our lives and so help to illuminate our lives and the lives of everyone we encounter. And now we will light our chalice. And we say, we light this chalice to celebrate the path before us, the warmth of kindness that shines from within us, and the radiance of wisdom that is shared between us and never goes out. Good morning. Every August, we go to the Jersey Shore for a week with my family. We all rent our own homes within a couple blocks of each other and sit on the same beach during the day. There are 40 of us. This year, my husband and I agonized over whether we should go or not. We did go, but cautiously. The week before we went, my brothers and I touched base with each other, trying to get a sense of where the others were coming from in regards to COVID-19. We all agreed no nighttime activities, no boardwalk, no movie night at Uncle Steve's, no dinners out. We also agreed no hugs and that we would social distance at the beach. We spent the week watching the kids play. We swam in the ocean and had tough conversations. My family is split in regards to politics, COVID-19, religion, and now virtual learning. My brothers and I have a tendency to gravitate to one another when we're together. At one point during our virtual learning discussion, my younger brother got up and left. Later, we teased him, saying we'd finished with religion. He could come back now. The good news is that despite our differences of opinion, we really do love each other. The weather held even though it threatened to rain all week. The ocean, as always, was soothing. No matter what's going on in the world, the waves come in and go back out. Peace and calm were temporarily restored. For 1 week, we were able to suspend all the anxieties of the year. Before we knew it, we were on our way home again, where everything was waiting for us. Everything. But for a short time, it was a reprieve, and it did, in fact, charge our soul. What are the things you've been doing to charge your soul during this most unusual year. Even though our community is gathering virtually right now, there are lots of ways to get connected and stay in touch with us throughout the week. You can find phone numbers and email addresses for our ministers and staff, along with a ton of other information about us on our website. This is the part of the service where we honor that connection by greeting one another. There's still plenty of ways to greet one another virtually. You can type a greeting into the chat window, send someone a text, or drop into the WellSprings Oasis group on Facebook. Right now, I'm going to text a WellSprings friend that I haven't connected with in a while. Thank you for your warm greetings. You are all invited to stay after our service to continue your conversations at our virtual coffee hour on Zoom. The link for that is listed below. And now is the time for our weekly announcements from Jessica Heikel, our Communications Director.
Hi WellSprings, my name's Jessica Heikel and I have 3 announcements for you this week. The first is that WellSprings is planning an anti-racism small group, but for those interested, there are a few steps to take before we can get started. You will have to fill out a questionnaire as well as attend one of 2 informational meetings in the coming week. I will put a link to that information in the chat so you can check that out at your convenience. The second announcement is that Miss Carol has sent out a survey for families to help her plan the Youth Spirit program for the coming year. If you haven't yet gotten a chance to complete that survey, I'll put the link in the chat as well so you can finish that. Lastly, Reverend Lee is changing the format of Lunch with Reverend Lee on Tuesdays on Facebook Live. Coming up for the next several weeks, she's going to have a special guest with her each lunchtime talking about a specific topic such as homeschooling your children through the pandemic, nurturing relationships when you're in quarantine, etc. We hope you're able to join her on Facebook Live in one of the coming weeks. Thanks so much, everyone, and I'll see you next week.
And now is a time of generosity. WellSprings impacts our lives and the lives of so many others. At this time, we invite you to share your gratitude for all that is done here by donating what you can. Now more than ever, we need to continue to give our donations in good faith to show our appreciation for all that is done here. Thank you for your gift. It is appreciated much more than you know. Our offering will now be gratefully received. And now is the time to regroup into the deep and soulful energy that's inside ourselves. We do this by doing what is most simple and elemental in our lives. We take a breath. We inhale and exhale without rush or hurry. We breathe in and we breathe out. There's nowhere else to go, nowhere else to be. So let's be here now together as we prepare for our time of mindful silence. We follow these words from Thich Nhat Hanh into our time of meditation. If we want to enter heaven on earth, we need only one conscious step and one conscious breath. Let us cultivate peace and experience presence in this quiet time together. Wherever it is that we are, whatever it is that we are doing, however it is that we are feeling, let us remember that peace and presence are always as close to us as is our own breath. May this be so for you this moment. May it be so for this day. May it be so for you in all the days to come. And may it be so for all of us. Usually this is the time we dismiss our kids for their time in Youth Spirit. These days, Youth Spirit is meeting on Zoom every Sunday at 9. So for now, let's see if we have any shout-outs from Miss Carol's Youth Spirit Yells. Miss Carol, are you there?
Hi everyone, Carol Breslin from Youth Spirit. I just wanted to take a minute to introduce the Youth Spirit Yell you're about to hear. It was sent to the Youth Spirit kids and everybody at WellSprings from Connie Nye, who's moved to Florida. It talks about our 7th UU principle, and that is, we believe in caring for the earth, the planet we share with all living things. It's about connection, and there are some great words to her song. I hope y'all will listen, including Youth Spirit kiddos, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Hi, I'm Connie, and I wanted to say to you all, hello, through the WellSprings in Spirit Yell. I just moved to Florida permanently, but Unitarian principles are embedded in me. The 7th principle, life's web is essential. To not believe we're part of it is crazy consequential, because we must take care of our Mother Earth. If we only think of people and the economy first, then we'll keep adding problems that lead to our doom. Mother Nature will keep sending us to our rooms. Issues like climate change and endangered species are connected like a puzzle of 1,000 pieces. So I'm here in Florida learning flora and fauna, even though it's new to me. I know that it's gonna be important to continue to understand these connections, especially when it comes to next fall's elections. Maybe if we listen closer to the Lorax, we wouldn't have to wipe everything with Clorox. So please do your best to protect nature's places, and I'll continue to teach and sing nature's praises. So I'll close with this thought, dear children of the earth, every day is Earth Day. Treat it as it's worth.
2, 3, 4. There was a Cape Town man, used to plow and sing. He loved his mule, and his mule loved him. When the day got long, like it does about now, hear him singing to his muley cow, like this. Come on, you sweet old girl, I bet the whole damn world we're gonna make it yet to the end of the road, singing hard times ain't gonna rule my mind. Hard times ain't gonna rule my mind. Hard times ain't gonna rule my mind no more. It's a mean old world, heavy in need. That big machine keeps on picking up speed. They were supping on tears, supping on wine. We all get to heaven in our own sweet time. So come on, you Asheville boys, turn up your old time noise. Kick till the dust comes up from the cracks in the floor, singing hard times ain't gonna rule my mind. Hard times ain't gonna rule my mind. no more. So come on, you ragtime kings. Come on, you all and sing. Pick up that dusty old horn and give it a blow. Singing hard times are gonna rule my mind. Hard times are gonna rule my mind. Hard times are gonna rule my mind no more. No more.
Good morning, WellSprings. It's good to see you today. I recognize I might look a little bit odd, so hold on one second. Let me fix this. There we go. Better, isn't it? You're probably more used to me this way. I'm more used to me this way. So thanks for indulging my goofiness today. It's for a purpose. It's that the show that I'm going to talk about for today's Spirit Flicks series, Spirit Flicks, this summer series that we do on the stories that we watch on our screens and the meanings that we find in those stories. It's a weird show. It's a very weird show, and the kind of upside down that I presented with, upside down obviously being popularized by Stranger Things. Stranger Things does not have a thing on the show for today, the Midnight Gospel, when it comes to the oddness and the weirdness department. And so before I get into talking about the Midnight Gospel, I wanted to share with you a story that kind of sets up what I'm going to talk about today. It goes back 13, maybe 14 years ago, right around the time actually, within a year or two, of when WellSprings was launched in 2007. It's about a person who I knew outside of WellSprings who fully intended to come to and attend WellSprings, but they never did, because by the time we had launched, this person had died. And this person had lived a long and in many ways pretty meaningful life, like packed a lot of years, a lot of life into a lot of years. And also had not lived a very easy life because of some of the struggles that this person lived with, some of the struggles that they had that kind of rippled out chaotically into the network of their beloveds. Grieving this person was not easy for the people left behind. And because the extended family knew that I had formed a meaningful bond with this person, they asked me to do the funeral, to preside at this person's funeral. And when we started to talk about who would offer eulogies, one of the first names that came up was the granddaughter of this person, of this woman who had died, because there was a strong bond, a strong connection with the granddaughter. And she spoke at the funeral, and I remember how moving it was, because it was so beautifully honest and truth-telling without any sense of judgment, just honesty. I mean, she got up and she talked about how she loved her grandmother so much, and also how her grandmother was not an easy person in many ways to love. And she went on to share some more details about who her grandmother was. And I remember almost when the granddaughter got up, like there was this collective sense of tightness. Like, was someone going to allude to, who her grandmother really was? And then as her granddaughter did it with such honesty and grace, kind of this collective sigh of, yeah, we can move into the truth of this person's life, the full truth of who they were and who she will continue to be to the people who remember her and loved her. And at the end of the granddaughter's words, she played the song, I think it's simply called For Good, from the musical Wicked, the Broadway musical Wicked, and it goes something like this. I'm not going to sing it. But I can't say that I have been changed for the better, but because I've known you, I've been changed for good. I can't say I have been changed for the better, but because I've known you, I have been changed for good. And that just puts such a beautiful point, honest point, on what the granddaughter was saying. I think of this sense of being changed, not necessarily for the better, but for good, in the midst of our own current circumstances, in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of COVID-19, which has revealed so much about our society that was not working back in the times before. And most people I talk to, connect with, talk about having been changed in some ways really meaningfully. Been changed for good. I know that's the case with me as well. But I think the jury is kind of still out collectively on this question. Have we been changed? Are we changing for the better? I don't think we know yet. We may not know for quite a while. I think of this question of being changed for good and changing for the better in the light of an article I read not too long ago. It's by the writer Andrew Sullivan, who talks about, in a kind of wide-ranging, wide-sweeping historical piece, about how plagues are apocalypses. They reveal, they open up what was concealed, they show some of the fault lines, or many of the fault lines in societies in which plagues, pandemics, apocalypses, as he calls them, occur. And he writes as someone who is the survivor of a pandemic, of the AIDS pandemic, someone who has HIV, but in this day and age now, and with the access to resources that he has, it's a manageable condition for him, not a death sentence. But in the early days of the plague of AIDS, he lost so many friends and so many loved ones. So he writes as a survivor. And when he's doing then this wide-scale analysis of plagues throughout human history, he says, so often when they open up those fault lines, they cause profound chaos and disordering. And sometimes what happens afterward is a reordering of society in ways more accord with some of the core commitments of our Unitarian Universalism. Greater justice, greater equity, greater attention to human care and human bonds and to society as a whole, and not just certain parts of that society. Again, it's always an imperfect journey, never completed. And Andrew Sullivan analyzes this and wonders, is that going to happen for us after, whenever after is? And one of the things he talks about is in the wake of pandemics, religion can become really odd and funky, and death cults come up, people who kind of make almost like a fetish of death and engage in all kinds of, like, you ever heard about the flagellants? That came out of the time of plague in the Middle Ages. But he also says forms of religion, forms of spirituality that are more oriented to the human heart, to kindness, love, compassion, justice, belonging. These kinds of spirituality can also flourish in the time after as well too. So I think of all of that in connection with today's Spirit Flicks show, with the Midnight Gospel. It is very much an R-rated show for older teens and for adults. It is animated, and it is about a character named Clancy Gilroy, who is what they call, or what he calls himself, a spacecaster. He is a podcaster who lives in space on the far, far regions of the known universe, way, way out there. I think it's called the chromatic ribbon. And what he does is he travels through a simulator that is just, shall we say, based on part of human anatomy. He travels through this simulator to visit worlds, planets that are undergoing their own apocalypses. He travels to a version of Earth in which he interviews the president who is fighting off a horde of zombies a zombie apocalypse that will bring kind of the curtain down on Earth. He travels to another planet, a blank planet that only has a water slide on it with no water, and he ends up getting into a dialogue with death, with the personification of death, the Grim Reaper, although kind of twisted, given what this show is and how it presents itself, talking about, and this is actually based on a real mortician, a writer, and what she talks about is how death has not been always seen the way that it is in modern American society, where death is removed. That's a small section of the history of the world. For most of our ancestors, death was something much more intimate, something they were much more acquainted with. So woven all throughout the Midnight Gospel, and again, it has that word gospel right there in the title, all kinds of questions and concerns about religion, and particularly kind of mystical forms of religion and contemplative spirituality and depth psychology, because the source material for this very, very far out and bizarre, and at times not quite all that palatable. I mean, it pushes the boundaries in some ways. This show is not for everyone. It gets kind of violent, and it gets, pretty scatological as well, too. But what this show is based on is a podcast series from the early 2010s from the comedian and podcaster Duncan Trussell. And it's based on interviews that he did with people talking about matters of spirituality and spiritual practice. And I think there's something so beautiful in the show at this time of pandemic and apocalypse. And the show wasn't planned for this. I just think it was, circumstance, serendipitous, well-timed. That all these questions of kind of matters of the heart and cosmic belonging and what breaks the heart and life and love and death set in these fantastical situations just feels so kind of well-suited for how challenging our world is right now, and also at the same time how meaningful our lives are right now. The question of who matters, and how do we include more people in the circle of love and belonging and justice and compassion? These are profoundly meaningful times that we are living through, even if these are abnormal times that we are living through. That's what an apocalypse is. It reveals fault lines, and apocalypses reveal possibilities. One of the things I am noticing in the people who I think are navigating this time most skillfully, most flexibly, is they are people, and I try to do this myself, I'm not always very good at it, but people who are allowing themselves to normalize how abnormal this time is. Just learning to say to themselves, this is hard, this is scary, I don't quite know what I'm doing, I'm learning as I'm going. I like to believe, when I can treat myself and other people with grace, that, we're all being graded on a curve right now, or at least we should be. If we can normalize abnormality, we may go a little bit easier on each other and turn towards our lives with greater compassion, which may open up greater capacity by accepting ourselves to actually change and grow and adapt to all of these things that are so challenging. The show actually reminds me of the writer Anne Lamott, and by the way, I think she's in the second episode, not as herself, but as one of the bizarre characters. She's from the original podcast, and she shows up in this show. It makes me think of her great little chapter in one of her books that we utilize in WellSprings 2.0, Listening to Our Lives, called Into Thin Mud. And in it, she sets the context of her life, a really difficult time, kind of a mini apocalypse in her life, in which she had a profound heartbreak, end of a relationship, and the beloved older people in her church were dying and sick, and her car broke down, and then the loaner car she had for that, she calls it a big Blues Brothers kind of thing, which gave her a momentary lift. That broke down too, and she was having struggles with money, and her elementary school age kid had a sty in his eye, and everything wasn't working, and she tried all of her well-worn go-tos to kind of lift herself out of it quickly, and they all just had, as many of those well-worn go-tos that we can go to, especially for instant gratification, it works for a while, but it wasn't sustainable. Actually ended up having her feel worse, until she took a walk with a friend, one of her oldest, dearest friends, the kind of friend that she says she has no more face to save with. She could be fully, authentically, vulnerably herself. And they took a walk in the kind of marshy, swampy, mucky area close to where they grew up, Northern California. And they landed, as she said, on their butts in the mud, and they were covered with silt and covered with mud. And she said she just started to laugh maniacally. And I can't remember if it's in this piece or another piece, but Anne Lamott says that laughter is carbonated holiness, and she feels a lifting of the weight and the burden of what her life had become at that moment, with all of its real hardships. And she and her friend kind of fell back into the mud and almost kind of drifted off for a while. When she came to, she saw that the stars were starting to come out. She looked up into those stars and she thought of all the hardships in her life. And she said to herself, God, I love the permission giving, the grace in this. She says, no wonder you're this sad. She just started to ease up by accepting the truth that her life was really quite difficult. This is what I see. This is a practice that I engage with, in fact, with many people I work with. Being able to turn to our lives and saying something maybe with a hand on the heart, noticing the breath in a moment of difficulty, just validating ourselves. This is a moment of suffering. This is a moment of pain. It's okay not to feel okay. And what so often happens, no one can make us do this. No one should want to make us do this, but the invitation is there when we feel kind of out of our depth, that instead of just chugging along and moving through all the time, I understand we got to get things done. But if we never allow ourselves to turn towards our pain, we will find ourselves out racing our own shadows, which of course we can't. They're always with us. And instead, if we can turn to normalize, validate our own experience with compassion, kindness, and curiosity, we may find underneath that permission-giving approach to ourselves a greater vitality, a hidden wholeness that was there all along, and some resources to be able to deal with the challenges of our lives, our heartbreaks, our losses, the strangeness of all of this, with greater love and depth and resilience. The kind of resilience that connects us to and with each other and to our own hearts. And this takes me back to the final episode of this season of the Midnight Gospel. It's only had one season so far. I think there's a second season coming at some point. And like I said, this is a bizarre show, and Clancy Gilroy, that spacecaster, he's kind of get the sense that there's a little something off with him. Like maybe he's been avoiding his life. Like that's why he finds himself way out there on the outer edge of the known galaxy in the multiverse, kind of not facing himself. He's on a quest for information. He grows tired with that. He's on a quest for enlightenment, but in a very spiritually materialistic way. I'm enlightened, he says, until he recognizes he's not enlightened at all. At one point, he's just on a quest for ice cream. Until the final episode. Now, I would have liked this show if not for the final episode, but because of this final episode, I love this show, and it will have a place ongoing in my heart. They kind of break down this sense of, is this Clancy Gilroy or is this Duncan Trussell? Because they refer to Clancy as Duncan in this particular episode. And it's for this reason. The podcast, the source material that this episode is taken from, is from a very particular interview with a person named Deneen Fendig, who was Duncan Trussell's mother. The podcast happened when Duncan interviewed his mother 3 weeks before she died of cancer in 2013. And you get the sense, listening to Deneen, that this is a person, she was a psychologist. Even more, you get the sense she was a healer. This is a person who had done their work. A person who had learned to show up for their lives with compassion and validation in and with and through the struggle, and came out through it with a big old heart full of love. And because this is a wild, fantastical show, We see the moment where she gives birth to Duncan, and we see him growing up and the two of them talking all along about death and love and all the things that matter and their relationship. And then we also see Duncan/Clancy laying her down in her deathbed, and she expires. And then we see Duncan giving birth to his mother again. It's beautiful. And we see the two of them transmuting, transforming, becoming a planet and stars in space. And we see them hurtling toward the inevitability of her death, represented by a black hole in this show, which can be bizarre and at times off-putting, unpalatable in its kind of over-the-top violence and gore and scatology. But here they are studied by a group of psychedelic teddy bears who want to study a mother and son who love each other. It's really just gorgeous. And as the episode starts to come to a close, as they move through life and death and rebirth and life and death and rebirth, now made of stardust, made of the things that make all of us, talking about loss and love, again 3 weeks in the real world before Deneen's death. Duncan speaking to her. She says, it breaks all of this, love and loss, it breaks your heart open. Our hearts have been closed because we've closed them because we defended ourselves against pain. And this, the great matter of life and death, this opens our hearts. And we see them rebirthed into space, not what they were, but still a part of this existence. And Duncan/Clancy says to his mom, well, I love you very much, and remember, this is happening in the real world. And she responds, I love you. I love you too. I love you, Duncan. And that kind of love isn't going anywhere. And there's another thing you find, that I may leave this plane of existence sooner rather than later, but the love isn't going anywhere. I'm as certain of that as I am of anything. And I got to tell you, I'm sitting there on the couch watching this, and for some of you know a little bit about my personal history. It was my mother's untimely death that for a long time changed me for good, but did not change me for the better. Can't say that's true anymore, thankfully. I think it's changed me for good, and it has changed me for the better, but not at first, especially not for the first decade after her death. And I am sitting there, I am openly weeping on the couch. It is a beautiful episode. Being able to allow ourselves to be not just changed for good by these times, but to be changed for better. I think it means accepting this invitation to, as Paul McCartney would say, let it out and let it in. Life, love, all of it. I'm going to close with this story from Rachel Naomi Remin, who's a doctor and even more a healer, who at the age of 15, when she received a diagnosis of severe Crohn's disease that led her to well over a dozen intensive operations, surgeries in her life, was told by the doctor point blank, you will not be able to live a full life. And how much depression that despair caused for her. But she found her way to the other side and became a healer, became a collector of healing stories. And she tells a story about an ER doctor, a very skilled ER doctor, but a ER doctor who wasn't quite connected to his heart. You know, he knew how to do what he needed to do well. And sometimes that included right there in the ER, delivering babies. And he took a lot of pride in it, but in a kind of detached clinical sense. He was good at it, but his heart wasn't in it. And there was one time that he delivered a baby in the ER. And he was holding the baby because he was clearing the baby's lungs, about to hand the baby back to mom. and the baby's eyes popped open. And he thought, this doctor this clinically detached doctor. His heart wasn't really in his work. He thought, this person, I am the first person this new person is ever going to see. And something shifted in him immediately. Something opened. And he came alive in a way he had not been until that moment. Something full and rich and meaningful opened in him. I love this story because it talks about how we can allow ourselves to perceive with the receptors of our heart, to look upon life again fully, meaningfully, even in the midst of disruption and death and disorder, kind of like an emergency room sometimes is, often is. But if we can perceive through the openness of our own hearts that even as we move through a time of disruption, death, and disorder, we can individually, collectively, and I trust the midnight gospel here, perhaps even cosmically, come alive in ways we have not yet come alive. May you open and perceive with the receptors of your own heart today. Amen. And may you live in blessing. Would you pray with me? A simple prayer today. Spirit, breath, may we be as fully alive as we are capable of in this moment. May we recognize that we are in the middle of it right now. And it is okay not to be okay. May we give ourselves permission to have the feelings and the thoughts and the antsiness and the angst and the anxiety, but also the love and the connection and the belonging. That are parts of this full life. Today, may we live truly a full life. Amen.
Winter is the oldest season, but quietly beneath the snow, seeds are stretching out and reaching, faithful as the morning glow. Carry nothing but what you must, lean in towards the light. Let it go, shake off the dust, lean in towards the light. Today is now, tomorrow beckons, lean in towards the light. Keep practicing the resurrection, lean in towards the light. The shadows of this world will say, no hope, why try anyway? Every kindness, large or slight, shifts the balance towards the light. Waters wide and open wider, lean in towards the light. Don't just walk when you can fly, lean in towards the light. When justice seems in short supply, lean in towards the light. Let beauty be your truest guide, lean in towards the light. The shadows of this world will say, no hope, why try anyway? Every kindness, large or slight, shifts the balance towards the light. Prayer I pray at eventide, lean in
We now extinguish our chalice, and although this light goes out, the light does not. And we say these words together. As we release this flame from its faithful service today, we allow the spark in each of us to burn on, to warm our compassion, to fire our delight, to light our paths today, tomorrow, and always. Hope to see some of you soon over at the Zoom coffee hour. All of you, may you be well, may you be safe, and may you truly be connected to who and what is most important to you. Take care.